I'm Lon Morris, District Manager of the Hollywood Social Security Office. The golden age of comedy in motion pictures ran from about 1912 to 1932. When you see this and hear the sound of laughter, you will recognize one of the world's great comedians, Mr. Harold Lloyd. Harold, welcome to Social Security in Action.
Thank you very much, Lon. It's a pleasure, really, to be here.
Well, it's certainly a privilege for us to have you here today.
Thank you.
Harold, a few months ago, one of the silent movies you made over 40 years ago was shown in Hollywood. And as I understand it, the tickets were sold out immediately. And when the movie was over, the audience applauded. Has comedy changed in the last 40 years?
Oh, my, yes. It's tremendously so. You see, it was so visual in those days, and we had to rely upon, especially in comedy, upon mime, pantomime, and today, of course, comedy is supplemented with dialogue, and it really goes past that. In fact, it's about 80% or more than that, even dialogue. So it's changed the whole procedure of the way the comedians worked in my day and the way they work today.
Mm-hmm. Well, you think the event of sound actually changed comedy?
Oh, changed everything in the motion picture industry, and very much so comedy. It didn't necessarily do what a lot of them thought it thought it killed the silent comedy picture. Well, that was not true. It supplemented it. At first they just had to get used to blending the two, and some of the different comedians were not used to talking, and they had to readjust their voices. They had to find out voice placement and find out that they shouldn't be talking all the time. But it did change it to mostly the comedy was quips and verbal type of comedy rather than the action and the gags, which is comedy business.
Oh, yes. We have some scenes here today that I think are really classics. Now, for example, here's a picture of the end of one of your wild chases. How were these chases done?
Well, the chases really were actually done right down on the streets. If we were driving a car like this and missing street cars and pedestrians, we actually were doing that. We were right on the street doing it. Of course, we had many policemen that we were in our service that were blocking off traffic, and we had our own traffic, we had our own pedestrians. But nevertheless, we were going right down the main street, and we were going fast. You couldn't go too slow. We couldn't undercrank too much, because if you did, it made the action of the people walking, it made them not natural. It was abnormal.
Oh, yes. Weren't these dangerous?
But, the chases were very dangerous, lots of them, and but they were real. They, of course, today, most of it is done with process. But even then, right now in process, the cameraman has to take a chance. Somebody's got to go down that lane and get something for...
Excuse me,
go ahead.
What do you mean by process? I don't follow you.
Well, probably process is a screen where they take the picture, and it's like a rear projection, and then they take and put your actors or actresses, your characters, in front of this screen. And in other words, we put an automobile in front of the screen, and the action is on the screen in the back, and looks like you're riding right down Broadway in New York, where you're taking it in the studio. And the whole process is used all the time now. But we didn't have process in those days. If we did had any form of it, it was so lacking in perfection that we used it very little.
Yes. Here's another scene that I'm sure many people will recognize. You made many thrill comedies, one in which you climbed tall buildings. Now, in this picture, was this trick photography or...
No, here again. This was actually up just as high as you see it. The people were under us at the time that we did it. Of course, I wasn't crazy enough to want to get out there and commit suicide, so I did have platforms built a long ways below me, probably about 16 feet or something like that below, so that the camera could shoot down, but there was no railings around it. We piled mattresses on it, and if you had to light flat, you could bounce off of it, and then there wouldn't be much need for the platform. But these pictures had a great impact. The funny part of it is this one here with the big clock, we call it Safety Last, and I would say out of, maybe around 300 pictures that I made, only 5 of them were up on sides of buildings. But the impact evidently was so strong I'm almost remembered as a thrill comedian today.
You know, I was telling you before the show that I thought
Yeah.
I should sue you because I'm afraid of high places, and I have been since I saw your comedy.
And I mentioned to you that I'm afraid of heights too. You know, when I'd start one of these pictures, it'd take me about 2 days to get adjusted.
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't do hardly anything the first 2 days. Then the trouble was you'd get overconfident.
Mm-hmm.
Like on this ledge up here. After I'd been working on it a week, it took so long time because we could only work right around from about 11 o'clock till 1 o'clock because shadows would come across the street. So you had, but I would get so confident that I'd walk clear out, past where the platform.
Oh, yes.
And of course that always annoyed the cameraman, the different ones back there, because I felt I knew what I was doing, but
Sure.
they didn't.
Here's another picture which certainly portrays some danger. How did you come upon the idea that danger could be funny?
Well, now here we had done it for a long time. Hal Roach was the one that I worked for. First was our producer, and later I went in for myself, and Hal went on and had many pursuits of his own. But he was responsible for our doing them to start with, and but I'll tell you how one of them, this one that I showed with the clock, I was walking up 7th Street, and I around about 7th and on 7th Street. Round Hill, a little past Hill, where the Brockman building is. And there was a tremendous crowd there, maybe 200 or 300 people or more. And I inquired what was going on. They said, a man's going to scale this building. And I said, really? So I stood around, and sure did. They came in, they had a ceremony, they introduced him, and he started climbing, and he got about 3 floors, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I just knew he was going to be killed, so I walked on up the street. And I didn't want to leave. If anything happened, I was going to be there to see what it's all about. And so I went around the corner where I couldn't see him, and lots of people were up there too. And I said, "Where is he now?" I said, "Oh, he's about the 5th floor." Really? And then I'd peek around. Sure, he was, and no ledges on it. He was climbing from window to window. And so I peeked around and waited until he finally got to the top. Then he got a bicycle, rode it on the edge of the building, finished that. Flagpole right on the edge, on the corner, and he crawled up the flagpole. It was a short one. Stood on top of his head, and of course the crowd were absolutely thrilled, and it had such a reaction on this group of people and on myself that I said, well, now, if it can have that and you do it properly on the screen, it should have the same results. So I went up there on the roof, met the young man, and had him come out to the studio and see Hal Roach and myself, and so we hired him. And then we wrote this other one. The funny part is that about 2 weeks before we start, he'd asked me to use if he could climb a little 3-story building like out in Glendale, and so we gave him permission. We thought, climb a 12-story building, 3 would be easier. And he slipped on the 1st floor, fell, broke his leg, could have been killed.
Sure.
And of course he held us up for about 3 or 4 weeks afterwards on things, so we finally decided to start, and we called him Limpy Bill, because that's what he was.
I should bet so.
He's in the picture. But
Harold, I know you're quite interested in the Shrine hospitals. Could you tell us just a little bit about them?
Oh, I'd be very happy to, Lon. I've been associated with that activity for many years now, 15, 20 years. We have, I'm talking about the Shrine of North America, and about 20 hospitals. We had 17 for many years. Now we've added 3 more to it, and I'll tell you about those too. But this organization of ours has been either curing crippled children or aiding them materially. And we have cured thousands and thousands and thousands of crippled children. And it's all done 100% charitable and completely without regard to race, creed, or color. And the Shrine, of course, at first financed this themselves entirely, and still do, but so many people found out what great altruism it has been, and that all the money that comes into the Shrine is used for that particular purpose, that so many people now have left wills and bequests and gifts to our Shriners Hospitals for Crippled Children, that it now has been able to build 3 more hospitals that are going to take care of children with burns.
Oh, yes.
And that is something that has been very neglected. I don't mean that they don't take care of a patient, but as far as the research on burns, they don't know nearly as much about it as they should know. And the Shrine is going in for that research and also keep on curing burn patients. And we're joining up with big universities like Harvard in Boston, another big university in Cincinnati, another one down in Texas, in Galveston. And it's magnificent philanthropy.
It certainly is.
Yes,
and
it
I
really.
would certainly wish we had more time to talk about it, but our time is up.
Thank
it
you,
has
Ron.
been a real privilege having you with us here today. Thanks for coming.
I appreciate it.
And remember, if you have questions about your Social Security, see your own Social Security office soon.